I did kill Kenyatta Band. But I want you to tell it like it is if you're going to tell it.
What happens when convicts unleash chaos in the courtroom? Today we're revealing some of the wildest, most shocking moments where criminals turn their fury on judges, leading to banned courtroom footage you won't believe.
What a bunch of you stupid piece of You threatened my life, you
And the,
you
This is Alan McCarty, and the audacity he displayed in the courtroom will leave you shocked. He's facing charges of making death threats at a judge in Daytona Beach, Florida. In 2017, Alan McCarty and his ex-wife were engaged in a custody battle over their children, and the judge who presided over the hearing was Circuit Judge Stasia Warren. Judge Warren gave custody of the children to Alan's ex-wife, and all was over. Or so Judge Warren thought.
Yeah, I want to report a crime that's about to happen.
What do you mean a crime that's about to happen?
Yeah, there's about to be a crime that's going to happen if my kids don't come back to me, you stupid bitch. Because your stupid judges don't want to bring people to courtrooms. I got a gun pointed at your building.
The Volusia County in Daytona Beach received the anonymous 911 call you just heard. The caller would later be identified as Alan McCarty. Alan threatened the dispatcher and Judge Warren in a series of expletive rants over the phone. Alan revealed that he was waiting for Judge Warren to arrive at work to shoot her. He had been upset that his children had been taken away from him and blamed the judge for that. Responding to this bizarre yet threatening call, 36-year-old Alan McCarty was arrested by police officers and soon indicted. He was charged with corruption by threat against a public officer, resisting an officer without violence, and disrupting court proceedings. He was soon brought to court months later to argue for his innocence. Except Alan McCarty seemed to forget everything about court procedures. In front of Judge Matt Foxman, he uttered every profanity possible at everyone in court. He insulted the judge, the 6-person jury, the witnesses, and the officers in the room. He was also yelling racial slurs at everyone in the room. This continued until Judge Foxman gave him a stern yet unusual warning for a courtroom.
I'm going to tell you to be quiet, and you need to be quiet. There's not going to be a second time. If there's a second time, I'm going to duct tape.
Except this made Alan even more furious, and he continued to disrupt the court.
I'm going to tell you, you just threatened my life, duct tape. Did everybody just hear that? You just threatened to duct tape me? Really? In the courtroom, a judge just threatened to duct tape me.
No, I said
You just said, on record, you're going to duct tape.
Alan continued to talk and then accused the judge of threatening his life, even though Judge Foxman only said he was going to duct tape him. Alan kept yelling that he was scared for his life and wanted to be removed from the court. It seemed like he was trying to prolong whatever verdict he was expecting from the court.
The judge threatened my life. I'm scared. I want to be removed. I would like to be removed from this room. The judge threatened my life and I want to press charges.
Alan threatened to press charges against the judge and he was eventually removed from the courtroom. His trial was rescheduled to Thursday, but Alan didn't come back with any good manners or regard for the court. He made rude signs at the judge and continually interrupted Foxman, who was again presiding over the trial. Despite being ridiculed and insulted, Judge Foxman remained calm and asked all the necessary questions, to which Alan replied rudely. Alan insulted the judge and Judge Warren. He even insulted his state-appointed attorney. He was eventually removed from the courtroom and made to sit behind in a small room adjacent to the court with a one-way glass.
Number one, I need to know whether or not you want to be here during the trial process.
No.
All right, do you want to testify?
Despite being removed, Alan did not stop yelling and cursing, making the court proceedings longer than they had to be. He eventually returned the next month and still showed no sign of remorse or regard for the court. Not only did he threaten the judges, he also threatened to harm a prosecutor and their unborn child.
Do you want to stop my...
I prefer not to, sir.
He then made a rude and disgusting offer to Judge Foxman, which Foxman declined while remaining calm. He was once again sent into the small room, but this time he continually resisted the 3 officers. He continued to threaten the prosecutor's unborn baby. Eventually, Alan McCarty was sentenced to 20 years in prison for threatening public officers and disrupting court proceedings. Alan McCarty was explosive in court, but how does it compare to a man confessing to his crimes while defending his innocence like Ronnie O'Neal did?
I did kill Kenyatta Barron, but I want you to tell it like it is if you gonna tell it.
That was a shocking confession from 29-year-old Ronnie O'Neal while he was in court after he was charged with the murders and attempted murder of his family. O'Neal fatally shot his girlfriend, 33-year-old Kenyatta Barron, at their home in Riverview, Florida in 2018. After murdering his girlfriend, he hacked his 9-year-old daughter named Ron Nevea O'Neal with a hatchet until she died. He then stabbed his 8-year-old son Ronnie O'Neal IV and thought the boy was dead. It was then that he poured gasoline into the house and set it on fire. Ronnie O'Neal was found and he initially resisted arrest until he was tasered by police. While he was taken into the police vehicle, he said that his victim, Kenyatta, was the devil and that the children were the devil's kids. Ronnie O'Neal IV survived the attack with severe wounds and was placed in the ICU. Investigation soon started and the details will make you scared. Kenyatta's daughter, Ron Nevea, was autistic and a special needs child. Her brother would later tell the court that Ronnie O'Neal had dragged her from her room into her parents' bedroom before he murdered her there. He did this because he wanted to get her away from the wheelchair she used to move around. After she was shot the first time, Kenyatta had called 911 as she was trying to get away from Ronnie.
911, what's the address of your emergency? What's going on? What's going on? I think I got gunshots fired at 4365 Rose Garden. I think I just heard 3 shots. Possible warrant at the address. Hello? And I heard him say, call the police, and I'm not hearing anything else.
8 minutes after this call, another call came in. This time, it was from O'Neal himself saying this.
I just been attacked by some white demons inside Kiki. Kiki, her name is Kiki, and she tried to kill me.
He was eventually psychologically checked and deemed fit to go to trial. He chose to represent himself for some reason, and the case went to trial in 2021. O'Neal was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, and 2 counts of aggravated child abuse. He was also charged with 1 count of arson and 1 count of resisting a law enforcement officer.
Evidence is going to show that we are under some of the most vicious, lying, fabricating, fictitious government you ever seen.
Because he represented himself, Ronnie cross-examined his son, who he had stabbed. Ronnie O'Neal IV testified to everything that happened and what led to the deaths of his mother and sister.
Did he do something to your sister?
Yes, he hit her with an axe in the head, and then in the back, and the back, and then the head.
Then it was time for Ronnie to cross-examine his son.
It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
Did I hurt you that night of this incident?
Yes.
I did. And how did I hurt you?
You stabbed me.
Further on into the trial, Ronnie accused the prosecutors and law enforcement of fabricating and tampering with evidence to accuse him of killing Kenyatta Barron and her daughter.
And the evidence is going to show that law enforcement tampered with evidence to meet their such high burden of proof.
As he delivered his closing arguments, Ronnie O'Neal suddenly blurted out that he killed his girlfriend.
I did kill Kenyatta Barron.
Ronnie O'Neal confessed to killing his girlfriend. According to him, it was true that he killed Kenyatta Barron, but he needed the prosecutors and law enforcement to tell it like it happened. He insisted that they fabricated evidence, but after his bombshell confession, while he was under oath, all that was left was sentencing. The jury recommended the death penalty for Ronnie after the session where he confessed to murdering his family. On June 21, 2021, he was given 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole, as well as 90 years to run consecutively. The case, which has since been dubbed the Riverview Murders, was described by the presiding judge as the worst case she had ever seen in all her career. As for the sole survivor of the murders, Ronnie O'Neal IV was adopted by Detective Mike Blair, one of the detectives on the scene of the murder. According to the detective and his wife, they didn't have it in them to leave the boy in the hands of the state, for the fear that he would be bounced from home to home. He was officially adopted 6 months after the murders. His name was soon changed to Ronnie Blair, and he revealed during an interview that he felt loved and as a part of the family. While Ronnie O'Neal almost murdered his entire family because he claimed the devil and demons had possessed him, how does it compare to killing someone by Satan's orders? We are now in Russia, where we're covering the case of Leonid Grazer. In 2019, 18-year-old Leonid Grazer murdered his older sister in their apartment in Moscow, Russia, and claimed that Satan ordered him to do it. 21-year-old Ariada Koral was brutally murdered in the hallway of the apartment they both shared. Grazer stabbed his sister multiple times before undressing her and himself. He then used her blood to draw demonic signs on both their bodies and sat down in the hallway until the police officers came. Upon investigation, drugs were found in the apartment, and it is possible that Grazer may have acted under the influence of drugs. Grazer was arrested and interrogated. At first, Grazer simply admitted to murdering his sister without saying he had been told to do it by Satan. When he was asked why, he claimed that murdering his sister was necessary, and that he simply did what he had to do. He also believed that killing her would somehow fix their relationship.
Тебе решение суда понятно?
In court, Grazer showed no remorse for his actions and smiled while he was being questioned. He said he had to get rid of the doubts he had in himself, and that's why he did what he did. Eventually, Grazer admitted to being fully aware of his intentions and was tried as a capable adult. During the session, Grazer was put in a glass cage to prevent him from escaping because of the worries that he may have been psychologically impaired. And he did try to escape. He kept measuring the small hole that was in the cage to see if he could fit. Despite the guards' warnings to not try anything funny, Grazer did this.
Or possibly even escaping, which is exactly what Grazer's planning to do.
When his first attempt failed, Grazer decided to try a much more available option of escaping. Grazer immediately tried to escape through the ceiling of the courtroom, sending the entire courthouse into chaos with the guards trying to stop him. One of the officers managed to pull Grazer's pants down but struggled to hold him. He eventually got help from the other officers. One of the arriving officers threatened to tase Grazer. It was the threat of being tased that made Grazer give up and get back into his cell.
Grazer's finally had enough.
Grazer was eventually sentenced to compulsory psychiatric medical treatment in 2020 for every 6 months. Due to the nature of Russian legislation, the public is prohibited from knowing what happened to him after this incident. Grazer's escape attempt may have failed, but Jeremy Christian's explosive courtroom outburst is one for the ages. What happens next will leave you speechless. The man you just watched is Jeremy Christian. He was found guilty of murdering 2 people in Portland, Oregon. Christian had gone on a rant on a train when he spotted 2 girls on May 26, 2017. He confronted them in what was described as extreme hatred. The girls, who were 17 years old, had been on this train before Christian got up and started saying that they should go back home. He also told them that they were nothing and that they should kill themselves for that reason. Jeremy said a series of insults that could only be described as someone who was very unstable. As Christian continued his full tirade on the young girls, bystanders became irritated with his actions and harassment, so they decided to stop him. However, the men who tried their best to stop him got worse than the girls. Taliesin Mirdan Namkai-Mesh and David Cole Fletcher had tried to prevent Christian from harassing the 2 girls. According to a witness, Namkai-Mesh had angrily told Christian to get off the train. When Christian refused to get off the train, Fletcher and Namkai-Mesh decided to shield the girls from Christian. Fletcher then attempted to push him away so he could step back. Christian fell backward and threatened to harm Fletcher if he touched him again. That was when the situation completely escalated. Jeremy stabbed Ricky Best, another man who was nearby, in the chest, and slashed Namkai-Mesh and Fletcher with the knife. CCTV showed Christian running away from the scene of the murders. Ricky Best died at the scene, and Nemkai Mesh eventually died at a local hospital. Fletcher survived with critical wounds, and the girls who they were protecting fled the scene as soon as the train stopped. If Jeremy was ready to show remorse for what he did, it wasn't when he was finally arrested a mile away from the crime scene. Christian was recorded at the back of the patrol car he was transported in saying,
I'm all good. I kept I'm happy now. I'm happy now. I can rest easy. Have a good one.
Christian said he was happy that he had stabbed both Namkai Mesh and Fletcher in the neck, and he did his part as a patriot. Jeremy Christian was charged with aggravated and attempted murder, as well as a felony of possessing a restricted weapon. During one of the trials, one of the women that Christian had harassed on the train gave a victim impact statement, and this caused him to throw a tantrum. He shouted multiple slurs and insulted the judge and the people in the courtroom. It seems that Christian was saying that the woman who had given a victim impact statement should have experienced the same thing Floyd did if he had gotten the chance to do the same to her. After his multiple tantrums and tirades in the courtroom, he was eventually escorted out of the courtroom while he was screaming and yelling insensitive remarks. When Christian's sentence was read, he wasn't in the courtroom. He was given 2 consecutive life sentences, which eventually came up to 51.5 years in prison. What is baffling is that this wasn't the first time that Christian had attempted what he did on the train. The day before he attacked the victims on the train, he had made threats on another train and threw a bottle at a woman. She maced him in retaliation before he got off the train. Now, if you thought that Jeremy Christian was disrespectful to the court, wait until you see what Ricky Hand snuck into the courtroom.
You just gave him 4 years. Well, guess what? Sir, don't say
Showing up to receive sentencing for a previous crime should have been all that Ricky Hand got in the courtroom the day of his sentencing, not adding more years to them. In Springfield, Ohio, 46-year-old Ricky Hand was being sentenced for multiple robberies committed over a significant period of time. He had robbed multiple convenience stores at night where he made away with money and other things. Ricky had committed up to 30 robberies and had been arrested for some of them. He was out on parole when he committed the one that put him back in the courtroom. He had attempted to rob John's drive-thru one night. The store owner was closing for the night, oblivious to the fact that an armed Ricky Hand was lurking around the building, waiting for his opportunity to strike. However, as Ricky made his way to the door, the store owner was waiting for him, armed as well, and began to fire at Ricky to scare him off.
This is John's drive-thru, West Main Street. A guy just tried to rob me and I shot him. He ran out the back door. Okay, is he injured? I think I hit him.
It didn't take long before Ricky had to get the bullet wound treated, so he went to a hospital. It was at this hospital that Ricky was arrested for attempting to rob the shop. He admitted to robbing the store, and the case was taken to the courtroom. Ricky was sentenced to 40 years in prison, and the reason he was given such a lengthy sentence was because he had pleaded guilty to 7 robberies earlier in 2016.
Did you just give me 40 years, sir? Listen, you just gave me 40 years. Well, guess what? Sir, don't say
In retaliation, Ricky pulled out bottles that contained his feces and urine, which he flung at his attorney and the officers around. He was quickly tackled and subdued by the deputies present. As a result of this action, Ricky Hand was charged with an additional 5 counts of harassment with bodily substance. He had attacked his attorney and 4 deputies with his waist. He was also charged with obstructing official business and retaliation. The fact that he had stored these bottles in his arm sling caused the judge to ask that the law enforcement agents intensify their searches before letting anyone into the courtroom next time. After Ricky's horrific crime, our next case involves the tragic killing of a police officer. On the 17th of April 2005, 27-year-old Esteban Carpio had been brought into the Providence Police Headquarters for questioning. He had stabbed an 85-year-old woman, and 2 detectives were assigned to question him. One of them was Detective Sergeant James Allen. During questioning, Carpio requested water, and the other detective went to get it for him. Unfortunately, While the other detective was away, Esteban caused chaos. A struggle ensued and he pulled Detective Allen's gun, shooting him twice. Before he was shot, Allen was heard shouting for help from the police officers, but they couldn't access the room because it had been locked from the inside. After murdering the cop, Esteban proceeded to jump out of the window of the interrogation room. The room itself was 3 stories high. He ran away from the police station, but he was soon caught 45 minutes later. Esteban was charged with murder and his arraignment hearing soon came. However, the sight that Esteban's family was met with made them outraged. He was wearing a mask that was designed to stop whoever wore it from spitting and biting at anyone else.
Step off.
Esteban's face was also almost unrecognizable. His eyes were swollen and only slightly open. They were red, swollen, and there was blood around them. His forehead, cheeks, and nose were also swollen beyond recognition. His parents broke down and were furious. They accused the police of brutality and said that they had mistreated him.
He was mentally ill, and he needed help, and we couldn't get it. We tried and tried, and he didn't deserve.
However, it was revealed after an FBI investigation that the injuries that Carpio had sustained were not from anyone attacking him, because he had jumped from an extremely high place after breaking out. His injuries largely came from broken glass and the force of hitting the ground. It was also revealed that when he was apprehended, he had struggled with the police officers, causing even more injuries. Particularly, police officer Christopher Zarella testified that while trying to apprehend Esteban, he punched the murderer in the face 3 times. This was not considered excessive force, and no officer was charged for that. Esteban's face went viral online because the mask was similar to that of Hannibal Lecter. His mother told anyone who would listen that Esteban was mentally ill. His mother claimed that they had taken him for a psychiatric evaluation by his mother. Investigation revealed that Esteban was under the influence of psychosis, which largely contributed to drug abuse. As a result, he was tried as a capable defendant. During the trial, Esteban pleaded insanity in front of a jury. However, the jury rejected his insanity plea because he was considered sane enough to be judged accordingly. Based on this decision, the judge handed down the maximum sentence. Esteban was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on October 10, 2006. He was also sentenced to 20 years in prison for stabbing the 85-year-old woman. In 2017, Esteban appealed to a federal judge. He claimed that the jury had wrongfully convicted him. He also said that he lacked criminal responsibility at the time and wasn't aware that what he did was wrong. He broke down in tears and said that he thought about what he did all the time and felt sorry.
I faced the facts of what I did and what happened.
Despite this show of remorse, his appeal was dismissed, and Esteban continues to serve his sentence at a high-security prison in Connecticut. Our next case took disrespect to another level. Wait until you see the disgusting, unhygienic, and disrespectful habit that Bass Webb brought into the courtroom.
There's no way I want to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I'll have to see you for one further second. Except for the very near next week.
The story of this convicted criminal, Bass Webb, will shock you when you realize just how evil a man can get. Bass Webb was accused of causing the death of 2 of his ex-girlfriends in the space of 10 years. He was also charged with running over a pretrial officer and a deputy sheriff for fun after he made a shocking and brutal confession. The reason Webb went to the county jail in the first place was because he had gone to tell the officers that he had just murdered his 31-year-old girlfriend, Bria Runewitz, by beheading her. When the officers tried to stop him, he jumped into the car and tried to escape. Some footage released from Bourbon County Jail showed Webb speeding through the parking lot to hit the 2 officials. One of them got out of the way in time, but the other was not so lucky. The officers sustained injuries, and Webb was caught and arrested after a brief chase. A week later, Webb was arraigned in court for assaulting these officers and murdering Runewitz, appearing in front of Judge Vanessa Dixon of Kentucky County. If Bass ever showed any form of remorse before entering the courtroom, he didn't have any when he got into the courtroom. Judge Dixon told him that she was removing herself from the case because she knew the officials that were attacked. Webb's response was extremely shocking.
Can you hear what you're saying?
Yeah.
That be yes?
Yes.
No way I want to try this case or have any further proceedings, or I'll have to see you for one further second. Except for the very near next week.
Webb spat on the judge and she wiped her face before Webb was escorted from the courtroom. In September 2013, Webb was sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of his girlfriend. He was called to the courtroom again in July 2014 to receive the punishment for assaulting the officers at the county jail. He was sentenced to 37 years in prison for this offense. Now, if you thought that was all, you would be wrong. Webb was not only a habitual offender, he had done something equally terrible a long time ago. In 2003, Sabrina Vaughn disappeared and her remains weren't found for 7 years. In 2010, after Webb was arrested and awaiting trial, the remains of Vaughn were found buried on a property that belonged to Webb's family. His family had requested a plea deal because they claimed that he was suffering from mental trauma. However, Webb refused to answer the court's order to get a psychological evaluation. When he was eventually tried for this murder in May 2017, Webb showed up with a more disrespectful attitude and look.
A closer look at Webb's recent head tattoos reveals a demented murder hit list. It reads, "Those that must die, all judges, all prosecutors, all cops, the media." Below that, 3 rats have been scratched out, and many more.
During the trial, Webb's behavior showed that he had no respect for the court or remorse for what he did. He was sentenced to life in prison with no option of parole. Initially, he had been granted parole on the condition that he served 20 years in prison. This exemption was canceled during his trial. Webb is being held at the Kentucky Department of Corrections for the rest of his life. Webb's poor hygiene was hard to miss, but in our next case, Melissa Hardwick's story takes a violent turn. Melissa Hardwick was charged to court with domestic violence in Kentucky and was required to appear at the Russell and Wayne County Family Court. In 2011, Melissa's estranged husband filed charges against Melissa, and Judge Edwards asked him to give his testimony and why he filed the order. The man revealed that Melissa had been arrested a number of times and she was eventually released from jail before they continued communication.
She got out of jail in April.
My personal life is none of your business. It has nothing to do with
Miss Hardwick.
No.
You will be held in contempt of this court if you become disruptive.
I don't care. I haven't done anything to this court.
As Melissa's estranged husband was trying to explain the situation, Melissa suddenly and rudely interrupted his testimony. Melissa swore and cursed, and Judge Edwards told the officers present that she would be arrested for contempt of court as she wouldn't stop talking. Melissa had some very serious objections about this sentence, and she snapped. The same crazy character that got Melissa in front of Judge Edwards in the first place was quickly displayed. Melissa lunged at Judge Edwards, attempting to jump over the judge's bench, and tried to strangle Judge Edwards. She was quickly stopped by the police officers present in court, and Judge Edwards remained composed and bothered about Melissa's sudden outburst. Despite being restrained, Melissa did not stop her verbal insults in the court as she swore and cursed.
Get off me!
Stand back.
Wait and see. Get my bracelet off.
Judge Edwards quickly made it known that Melissa would be facing another judge after what happened, and she would be charged criminally for attacking and threatening her. The court officer who had helped to restrain Melissa said that he had worked there for 3.5 years, and this was the first time he had seen anything of the sort happen. Melissa was arrested and charged with third-degree terroristic threatening, intimidating a participant in the legal process, and resisting arrest. Her bond was set at $25,000, and Melissa had to spend the first 10 days she was initially arrested before appearing in front of another judge. When Melissa was eventually sentenced for attacking Judge Edwards, she was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to 120 days in prison. The domestic violence order that was filed by Melissa's ex-husband was also upheld, but no information was later provided about what punishment she got for the initial offense she committed. Where Melissa Hardwick's actions were somewhat expected considering her prior behavior, Joseph Zieler's reaction was so sudden that it will catch you by surprise. On May 9, 1990, Jan Cornell, a healthcare worker, left her 11-year-old daughter Robin Cornell with her friend 32-year-old Lisa Story in Cape Coral, Florida, to go to her boyfriend's house for the night. Cornell returned to a horrific nightmare no parent should experience: her daughter lying lifeless on the floor. Robin and Lisa's Story were discovered by Jan, and it was revealed that the two of them were brutally assaulted and murdered in the house. Jan called 911 in tears and panic and began asking for help.
God, please, there's someone in my house. Someone broke in my house. I think my daughter's dead. Oh my God, please hurry. Nan, please just calm down with me. Oh my God!
Police came and an investigation revealed that Robin and Lisa had been suffocated with pillows and violated after they passed. The murderer then took pictures of Robin and her mother and arranged them on the ironing board next to Robin's body. The killer then stole multiple things from the crime scene, including credit cards, a checkbook, and a wristwatch Jan had bought for her boyfriend's birthday, which was 2 days away. Despite all efforts to catch the killer, nothing was ever found and the case went cold for 26 years. In 2016, a man named Joseph Zieler was arrested for allegedly shooting his son, injuring him. Due to a law that was passed because of Robin and Lisa's murders, Zieler's DNA sample was required to be run against the samples that were recovered from the crime scene. After it was entered into the database, Zieler's DNA sample matched the one from the crime scene. According to investigators, the bodily fluids that were found in the apartment matched Zieler's DNA with a frequency of over 1 to 83 quintillion. There was no other way around it. Zieler was the one who violated and murdered the two victims. As a result, Zieler was arrested and charged with capital murder. Prosecutors asked for the death penalty because of the severity of the murders. He initially denied knowing either of the victims or Jan herself.
Do you know Jan Cornell?
No, I don't know Jan Cornell.
Do you know Lisa Story?
No.
Do you know Robin Cornell?
No.
However, during the same questioning, he changed his story and said that the only reason they had found his DNA at the crime scene was because he had been involved with Jan Cornell in December 1989. He said that he had been intimately involved with Jan and her friend when he came to Cape Coral, and the reason he gave for his DNA being present and viable at the scene will disgust you. He called Jan Cornell a pig and went on to disrespect her and her reputation even further.
I was here in December of '89. I testified to that earlier. And what I believe happened is I slept with Jan Cornell and Leanne Deller, and they were just too much of a pig not to wash their sheets.
Zieler went on to claim that the prosecutor asking him the questions was framing him. Zieler was found guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder, and he went straight to trial.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder of Robin Cornell. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 2 of the charge. The defendant is guilty of first-degree murder of Lisa Story.
In June, Zieler was once again required to appear in court for his sentencing. The jury at this period had voted by a 10-2 margin and recommended the death penalty. Right after it was revealed that the jury recommended the death penalty, Joseph Zieler's actions will leave you shocked beyond words.
What's that?
I'm sorry. Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Relax. Don't cough. Relax.
Zieler showed no form of remorse whatsoever. When he was brought back into the courtroom, he was said to have growled at the judge, and it was revealed that he had written the word killer on his teeth. He also reportedly flipped off the camera and kept making rude gestures. Zieler was sentenced to death in June 2023, and he was taken to the Department of Corrections. Jan Cornell, Robin's mother, talked about how she felt knowing that he had received the ultimate punishment for his crimes. She said that even though he didn't confess, all evidence pointed to the fact that he did it. Zieler was moved to death row in August 2023, and in an interview he did, he said he was eager to get onto death row because then he could overturn the sentence and walk out a free man. However, Zieler never got the chance to do so. Zieler may have turned against his own attorney, but our next case takes things to an even more extreme level. On June 15th, 2017, a Boardman woman was found dead and riddled with bullet holes on Market Street, Youngstown, Ohio. And it was the beginning of a really long and painful trial for the family of the victim. Elizabeth Pledger Stewart was the victim of the entire situation, and the man who initiated it all by murdering her is 59-year-old Dale Williams. He was apprehended by Youngstown police after forcing Elizabeth's car off the road, causing a crash, and then firing multiple shots at her until his gun was empty. All of this happened during the day, and according to one witness who refused to reveal her identity, Dale Williams had waited in an alley 45 minutes before he chased and killed Elizabeth in the middle of the street with witnesses present. It seems like he wasn't considering the consequences of what he did. Elizabeth was 46 years old when she was chased by Dale, who was later revealed to be her boyfriend. He didn't just wake up and decide to kill her. It was revealed that Elizabeth had filed a report to the police the night before Dale killed her. She told police just 11 hours before that Dale was upset and was angrily accusing her of seeing someone else. Before then, he told her he was going to catch her in the streets before he proceeded to chase her the next day, where she was probably trying to run away from Dale. He chased her with his van until he crashed into the back of her car. The police caught him in the act of emptying his bullets into Elizabeth's body, where they arrested him and took him to court. Williams was charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, felonious assault, and having weapons under disability. Elizabeth had 3 children, a 14-year-old girl and 2 other male children whose ages were not mentioned. When the trial began, her 14-year-old daughter was ready to give her statement. However, as that time came closer, it didn't take long for the court to realize her 2 sons, Anthony D. and Jerome Stewart, had other plans besides seeing their mother's murderer standing without anything threatening his life, so they decided to change that. The 2 men lunged at Dale Williams and began attacking him until they were subdued by deputies. One of them had to be stopped with a taser, which led to Elizabeth's aunt, Janet Dees, freaking out and screaming at Dale Williams, as well as the deputies after they hit one of Stewart's sons. This disruption caused the court session to be postponed till the next week, where Janet Dees finally had a chance to say everything she had been holding in.
We saw him, his face, we felt it was so much emotion due to a flashback of how he just killed my niece.
By the time the trial was over, 2 years later, 62-year-old Dale Williams was sentenced to anywhere from 23 years to life imprisonment. He had no reaction to his sentence when it was read to him. As for Anthony and Stewart, the disruption they caused earned them a few weeks behind bars. They spent 30 days in prison for contempt of court, but it must have been worth it because Dale was going to be in prison for so long that they may never see him alive again. Watching a murderer stand calmly after taking a life can push anyone to the edge, and in Michael Madison's case, it's hard to blame a grieving parent for losing control. No one should be punished for an emotional outburst in the face of such a tragedy. Michael Madison, a serial killer who faced multiple charges such as 3 counts of murder, sexually motivated aggravated murder, kidnapping among others, was definitely not expecting to be attacked in court after what he did. Between 2012 and 2013, under 9 months, Michael had killed 3 women in Ohio before he was arrested. He was read his charges and the potential punishment for each of his charges before he was sent to court. Madison was born on October 15, 1977, to parents Diane Madison and John Baldwin. He was the result of an accidental pregnancy, and Baldwin claimed that he was not the father of Madison. Madison would grow up with his mother and her boyfriends, who all mistreated him as he was growing up. Not much was known about Madison until 2013, when someone requested that the police examine the case of foul odor that was coming from a garage that had been rented to Madison. Upon entering, they found a decomposing body inside and 2 more in a backyard and the basement of an empty house. The bodies were all wrapped in plastic bags, and they were all in close proximity to Madison's house. Eventually, the police got a search warrant to search Madison's house, where they found evidence tying him to the murder of these women. After a short standoff at his mother's house, Madison was arrested. The victims were identified as Shatisha Sheely, 28, Angela Deskins, 38, and Sherelda Helen Terry, 18. Madison confessed to kidnapping, killing, abuse of corpse, assault, and mutilation of the 3 women. The details of what he did to them are too gruesome to describe.
How you doing, Your Honor? My name is Van Terry. Right now, I guess we're supposed to, in our hearts, forgive this clown.
Van Terry lost all composure when Madison smirked at him, showing no remorse whatsoever. He jumped at Madison and was quickly stopped by deputies before the session was stopped for a short period, before order was restored with the help of the police. The jury delivered no mercy for Madison as expected, so it was not a shock when Judge Nancy McDonnell announced that there was a unanimous decision to give him the death penalty. After his sentence was read and Madison was led away, The parents of the victims expressed their feelings upon seeing their daughter's murderer pay for his crimes. Madison continued to pay for his crimes as he awaited his execution in prison. It was learned that the inmates of the jail he was sent to severely beat and injured him after they discovered what he did. He was hospitalized for 2 months before he was sent back to jail. However, when he got there, he was again slapped and had his head smashed on a desk for his crimes. 3 years after he was sentenced, his mother, Diane Madison, was killed from multiple stab wounds by her 28-year-old grandson, Jalen Plummer, who pleaded guilty to all charges. If you thought Michael Madison faced a family's fury, wait until you hear about Diamond Alvarez. Her family's relentless fight for justice will leave you stunned, showing just how far loved ones will go to make a convict feel their pain.
As Diamond Alvarez's mother began walking towards De Leon, a bailiff holds her back. That's when the situation escalates, with Diamond's uncle jumping in from the gallery and punching De Leon. De Leon's mother then jumps in and pushes Diamond's mother at one point, and the two fight in front of the judge.
Diamond Alvarez was unfortunately not around to witness just how much her family was ready to risk it all for her after her killer showed no remorse for the horrible end he gave her. Diamond Alvarez was 16 years old when she was brutally murdered by 19-year-old Frank Delian Jr. outside her home. On January 11, 2023, 16-year-old Diamond was shot 22 times when she took her dog for a walk. Her family heard gunshots and the family called the police after their dog came back home without Diamond. Her family went to search for her, and her brother found her just before she passed away. According to her family, Diamond died in her mother's arms after they did all they could to save her. Investigations showed that the two were on the verge of a breakup when Frank shot her. The two were in a relationship when Diamond found out that Frank had been cheating on her and was in a relationship with someone else. They had dated for about 6 months before they broke up. Even though his murder trial began almost 10 months after he killed Diamond, he didn't show up to the first day of his trial. This caused many people to ask questions, and law enforcement officers confirmed that he was in custody. They said the reason he had missed the first day of his murder trial was because he had gotten into a car crash on his way to the court that day and had to be taken to the hospital to get treated for the wound. However, since he didn't show up to his first day, he forfeited the $250,000 bond for his bail. After his bail was posted, he was released, and Diamond's mother was fearful as he lived close to her. She said they had received threats after they had demanded justice for their daughter. After he didn't show up, he was sent to a county jail after he was released from the hospital. He was eventually charged, and Anna Mikado, Diamond's mother, had to appear in court for the trial. It would have been a painful but calm trial if Diamond's family had not snapped from the despicable attitude that Frank had displayed. He had shown no remorse whatsoever, and this caused Diamond's mother to lose it. As she was giving her statement, Diamond's mother told Frank how she felt about what he did to her daughter. Frank smirked at her, and nobody knew what Diamond's mother was doing until she started moving fast towards Frank. She was stopped before she could get close to him, but that didn't stop Frank from almost getting mauled by the rest of the family. While Diamond's mother was being stopped, her uncle sprinted to where Frank was standing and jumped at him fully with the intent of attacking. Frank's mother responded to this and tried to defend her son by attacking Diamond's mother, which caused Diamond's aunt to attack and try to beat Frank's mother. Her uncle was taken into custody, but he was eventually released without being charged with anything.
That was wrong of us because we're not monsters. But it's so much hate because I want my daughter back. And what he did was horrible.
Eventually, Frank accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to 45 years in prison for the murder of Diamond Alvarez. The judge and jury ruled that Frank had to spend at least half of his sentence in jail before he was eligible for parole. It would seem that Diamond's family had other plans to attack Frank, but he was quickly taken away before they decided to risk it all and attack him again. The emotional responses of these people are more than enough to consider permanently allowing convicts to be hit at least once by the grieving families. Frank Delian Jr. narrowly avoided the family's wrath, but Adrien Dunn took on the officers right in the courtroom.
That courtroom scuffle marked the end to a murder case that began in the parking lot of this apartment complex.
Yelling profanities in the courtroom will always be classified as a shocking behavior to exhibit, no matter the situation. However, Adrien Dunn considered it to be good enough after he was given the verdict. The clip you just saw is of Adrien Dunn. He faced murder charges in San Antonio in 2012. Adrien was an ex-convict who found himself in the courthouse once more for shooting and killing Rakeem Tarek Charles. According to the police, Adrien shot Rakeem in the back once in an apartment parking lot after a deal went wrong between them on July 16, 2012. Killing someone else is already a horrible thing to do, but to make matters worse, this wasn't Adrien's first rodeo. During his trial, a prosecutor named Nicole Phillips told the jury that he had been arrested and sent to prison twice after he murdered Rakeem. Before that, Adrien had also committed another shooting before he killed Rakeem. The prosecutors who were involved in the trial petitioned the jury to give the maximum sentence to Adrien because not only did he have a long history of crime and violence, but he also showed no remorse for his actions. Another prosecutor, Jason Goss, can be seen holding the hand of the victim's parents while arguing to the jury that Adrien should be sentenced to life in prison, as it was necessary to prevent something like that from ever happening again. Killing someone is horrible, and not showing remorse for taking another person's life makes everything even worse. Anybody should do their best not to add to their crimes after this one. Except Adrien's reactions showed that he regretted nothing. During the trial, Adrien's reactions and behaviors were likened to those of someone who was bored of being in a classroom. He showed no remorse and kept moving and squirming around in his seat with an unrepentant and nonchalant look on his face.
Don't give Adrien a chance to go into prison and try to make something of himself so that when he gets out, if he ever gets out, he can try to be an asset to our community.
Despite his attorney's argument, the jury deliberated for 2 hours before they agreed that the appropriate sentence for Adrien was life in prison. As the jury's decision was read out, Adrien began to wrestle with several Bexar County Sheriff's deputies who were attempting to escort him outside the courtroom. Adrien's reaction was uncalled for and very disrespectful to the memory of his victim and their parents, but compared to what TJ Lane, the next convict in our list, did, you could call Adrien's reaction a walk in the park.
Moments after entering the courtroom, Ohio school shooter TJ Lane took off his shirt. Underneath was a t-shirt with the word killer handwritten on it.
On the morning of the 26th of February, 2012, 6 students were shot in the cafeteria of Chardon High School in Ohio. 3 of them ended up dead with 2 others hospitalized, one of which ended up permanently paralyzed. The perpetrator, 17-year-old sophomore Thomas T.J. Lane III. Lane was a former student of Chardon High who had switched to Lake Academy Alternative School for special students, but used the same bus as most of the victims. At around 7:30 a.m. local time, Lane stood up in the Chardon High School cafeteria and began shooting toward 5 male students at a table with a .22 caliber handgun. And as he fled while being chased by a couple of teachers, he shot at another victim, this time a female student. Lane was eventually identified and arrested by police outside the school near his car, which was parked close by. Of his 6 victims, 3 managed to survive, including 17-year-old Nick Walsack, who was shot several times, but the other 3 weren't so lucky. According to student witnesses, Lane had something of a rivalry with one of the victims, Russell King Jr., because he had recently begun dating Lane's ex-girlfriend. Since Lane was under the age of 18 and not formally charged as an adult, he was considered by the law as a juvenile, and a detention hearing rather than a trial was held for him on the 28th of February, 2012. Lane apparently had a history of juvenile delinquency, and after his arrest, the presiding judge allowed the release of his juvenile records to the press. The records revealed that Lane had been arrested twice in December 2009, once for assisting an assault on his uncle and the other for committing an assault himself. Prosecutors indicated that they wanted Lane charged as an adult, and eventually on the 1st of March 2012, he was formally charged with 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. However, the judge postponed the decision for Lane to get a mental competency evaluation. Lane was finally indicted on all 6 charges that June, and months later, on the 26th of February 2013, the 1-year anniversary of the shootings, Lane pled guilty to the charges with his sentencing hearing date set for the 19th of March 2013. However, on the day of his sentencing, Lane's behavior would send shockwaves throughout the court. After he entered the courtroom, he removed his dress shirt to reveal a white t-shirt which had the word "killer" handwritten across the front. And not only that, Lane also smiled and smirked at the judge and the victims' families throughout the hearing. Lane was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. But after being sentenced, Lane would once again shock the courtroom. This time, he uttered a quite graphic statement about the murder of his victims to their families before hitting them with the F word and throwing up a middle finger to the attendees.
In Ohio, a teenager convicted of a high school shooting that killed 3 students is back in custody after daring escape overnight. TJ Lane climbed a prison fence last night with 2 prison inmates.
The story of Thomas Lane wasn't over, however, and on the 11th of September, 2014, he escaped from the Allen Correctional Institution, along with 2 other inmates using a makeshift ladder. Lane was eventually captured near the woods a day later and then transferred to the Ohio State Supermax Penitentiary. Today, Lane spends his days behind bars at the Southern Ohio Maximum Security Correctional Facility and will probably be there for the rest of his life. Disrespecting the victims and their families in a way that has never been seen will be the exclusive title of TJ Lane, but a violent reaction from Jaleel Hoskins is violent enough to make it onto our list. On March 19, 2013, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a 26-year-old woman and mother of 5 named Latrice Maze was declared missing. Less than 2 months later, the police in Grand Rapids had reason to believe that her body had been burned and dumped in a landfill after her murderer put it in a dumpster. The murderer in question turned out to be her boyfriend, 25-year-old Jaleel Hoskins. Latrice Maze's family wanted to know her whereabouts, and attempts to find her soon became a nationwide search. At first, Hoskins kept on insisting that he knew nothing about her disappearance and had nothing to do with her death. He was interviewed by a TV reporter 24 hours after he was arrested and answered questions that marked the beginning of a trying period for Maze's family.
I wouldn't, like I say, at this point in time, I wouldn't even say a murder because, like I say, I mean, to everyone's knowledge, no, I have nothing to do with the murder. I have nothing to do with the disappearance.
It didn't take long before Hoskins changed his story about knowing nothing about the murder of Maze after he saw the level of evidence and testimonials that pointed to his involvement. Hoskins' cousin testified to the court that Hoskins had told him that he choked her before wrapping her body in a blanket he had taken from her daughter's room.
He just told me that he put her in a garbage can.
In the what?
Garbage can.
Hoskins' cousin was also charged with perjury because he had lied before he confessed to doing so. He claimed to have done so to protect his cousin. Hoskins was supposed to face assault charges after he stabbed the man who is the father of 2 of Maze's children. He had stabbed him outside a bar and allegedly killed Maze because he thought she was going to go to the police. One of Hoskins' friends said that Hoskins had asked him for help to dump Maze's body because he couldn't carry her himself.
I need some help. I can't carry her by myself.
Another crucial piece of the evidence was a police dash cam picking up audio when the said police officer responded to a call from the home where Maze was last seen. The call had claimed that Hoskins was abusing Maze and that she needed help.
You ride with a friend? I can take you to a shelter, but I can't force you to leave.
When Hoskins realized that there was overwhelming evidence against him, he switched up his story and pleaded guilty to the murder of Latrice Maze. He delivered an emotional speech as he wept while he was confessing to what he did to Maze. He also admitted to tampering with evidence. He took Maze's life because he thought that Maze was going to report him to the police after she reported domestic abuse earlier that day. Initially, Hoskins was charged with open murder, which usually resulted in life in prison without any possibility of parole. The reason Maze cooperated was because she feared losing custody of the children she had with Hoskins if she reported him for an assault. Hoskins was eventually sentenced to 50 to 100 years in prison for murder, habitual crime, perjury, and tampering with evidence. Hoskins' reaction caused the courtroom to erupt into chaos like you've never seen before. After he was read his sentence, Hoskins reacted violently by throwing the podium towards the judge before he was escorted out. He was seen with his eyes bulging with fury. This reaction caused a struggle between Maze's and Hoskins' families, where they began to yell at each other as Hoskins was led to where he would serve his sentence. In the history of throwing things at people, nothing is going to prepare you for what Taylor Schabusiness had in store for her attorney.
Stop it.
The woman you just saw is Taylor Schabusiness. On February 23, 2022, the dismembered head of a 24-year-old American named Shad Therian was found in a bucket by his mother in Green Bay, Wisconsin. His mother, Tara Pakanich, called the police and they discovered several bisected body parts in different locations. The perpetrator? Taylor Schabusiness. Therian and Schabusiness had been involved in a relationship for a while, and 2 days before parts of Therian was found, Taylor had picked him up from his mother's house. She took him to another apartment where they had met up with a friend and ingested quantities of hard substances. Shortly after, they were under the influence, so they went back to Therian's apartment. When they arrived, they got intimate in the basement. Tara Pakanich had been out with her boyfriend when her son and Taylor arrived in the house. However, during this process, Taylor strangled Therian until he started to cough up blood, and didn't stop until he gave up. She killed Therian with a metal chain before dismembering his body and putting his head in his mother's basement. She also removed Therian's organs and parts and put them in plastic bags, cardboard boxes, and a storage tote. The particular murder was so gruesome that it is still being talked about. If what Schabusiness did to Therian when he was alive was horrifying, it was later revealed that what she did to him afterwards was even worse.
But when did you start, cutting up his body?
Like almost right away. I was sucking and cutting at the same time.
Schabusiness mistreated Therian's body for hours after he died. She sexually assaulted him and mutilated his body with intimate objects after being intimate with the body herself. She admitted this with no ounce of remorse in her behavior, but this was not even enough. Schabusiness appeared in court after she was arrested 3 months later by the police when they found the missing remains of Therian in her minivan. She was charged with intentional homicide, third-degree sexual assault, and mutilation of a corpse, among other counts. Investigation revealed that Taylor Schabusiness had drawn inspiration from the infamous serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, who had ritualistic habits when he murdered his victims.
You meet the same fate as your idealistic Jeffrey Dahmer. So have a good life, shit business.
Taylor claimed that after she dismembered Therian, she drained his blood into the bathtub and took a shower with it. This particularly horrifying revelation shocked the interrogator to the core. Eventually, it was time for Schabusiness to defend her position. However, she had other plans.
Stop it. Stop it.
During this court appearance on February 23rd, Schabusiness suddenly attacked her lawyer, shocking everyone who was in the courtroom at the time. She hit him in the face before the lawyer fended her off himself, before the officers in the courtroom tried to subdue her. 6 months before this, on September 1st, 2022, the lawyer Schabusiness attacked, Quinn Jolly, had submitted a plea of not guilty by insanity due to the nature of Schabusiness's actions. It seemed that the reason Taylor attacked her attorney in the first place was because Quinn had requested that the trial date be moved back a little. After this incident, however, Quinn told Judge Thomas Walsh that he planned to remove himself from the case after that session. After this outburst and sudden attack from Schabusiness, her future appearances in court showed her wearing a spit guard due to her unpredictable actions. In one of these sessions, Shad Therian's uncle told Schabusiness that what she did was horrible, and it was a consequence of her refusing to get help for her condition.
There's help out there. And if you take the path to go get the help, you wouldn't be in this situation right now. None of us would be in this situation. But to take the cowardly path that you did and to make other people suffer because you were suffering is pretty shitty.
Michael Therian.
Okay, go ahead.
Taylor, I just wanted to say that I forgive you for what you've done to my son. Yeah, you made a bad choice, and now you have to live with it. And like I said, I forgive you, and And I'm gonna ask the judge if he can, if she can see the streets again sometime,
Schabusiness showed no remorse for anything she had done and was seen smirking on multiple occasions. Judge Walsh didn't think this was right or even permitted in any way, because what Taylor did was so terrifying that the judge said that it offended human decency. The jury took only 30 minutes to decide on their verdicts, and they found Schabusiness guilty of all charges. Even though Schabusiness's new attorney had insisted on a plea of not guilty on the basis of insanity, the jury said that the murder was premeditated and calculated. Schabusiness was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and she showed little to no emotion as her sentence was read to her. Taylor idolized Dahmer, but our next case involves a female who went on an even more terrifying rampage.
You're relentless, you stab, you stab, you stab, you stab, you stab until he was dead.
In 2013, Camilla Gamut was living with her 38-year-old boyfriend, Marcel Hill, in Jackson, Mississippi. The pair had opposing personalities, as Marcel, who suffered with multiple mental and physical disabilities, was described to be a friendly, childlike man and worked at a fast food joint. On the other hand, Gamut, who had a difficult childhood living in 13 different foster homes, was known to be a substance user who had an abusive nature and a tendency for violent outbursts. Gamut had previously been arrested for assaulting an ex-boyfriend and would bring the same mistreatment behavior to her relationship with Hill, often bullying and seriously assaulting him. One time, Gamut stabbed Hill with a knife and stitched up the wound afterwards. She also punctured his lung in another assault incident, and in a third incident, she hit him in the head with a hammer. On all 3 occasions, Hill chose not to report Gamut to the authorities, and he wouldn't live to rue his inactions. On the 18th of May, 2013, Gamut and Hill got into a brutal physical fight where, in a fit of rage, Gamut absolutely violated Hill, bludgeoning and stabbing him multiple times with a knife and frying pan till he was unconscious and cutting the torso of his dead body open. Hearing the racket coming from their home, a neighbor called 911, and when police arrived, they were met with a house in complete disarray. Furniture had been smashed. The knife and frying pan, as well as Gamut, were covered in Hill's blood. Hill had been stabbed 11 times, but remarkably, Gamut had sustained no injuries and was only slurring her speech after she was found. Gamut was swiftly arrested, but claimed to authorities that she had been asleep in the living room when someone had repeatedly hit her over the head, which led her to defend herself from the unidentified attacker before she eventually realized that it was her boyfriend. During the court hearing in March 2014, Gamut's claims were easily dismissed due to the many holes in her story. On the 16th of April 2014, Gamut was found guilty of the charges and sentenced by a Jackson County Circuit judge to a life in prison without the possibility of parole. However, Gamut's reaction to the sentencing would spark a series of outbursts in the court, especially from the judge. Before the verdict was pronounced, Gamut showed no signs of remorse, merely rolling her eyes and laughing as Hill's family read out an emotional letter to her. The presiding judge reacted to this by saying he hoped Gamut died in prison, and that if Mississippi was a death penalty state, she would have been handed the electric chair. Gamut's rampage was horrifying, but our next case takes a dark turn as a messy divorce spirals into murder.
Guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
Diana Lovejoy, a fitness instructor and YouTuber, was in a strained relationship with her ex-husband, Greg Mulvihill, as the pair battled over details concerning their contentious divorce, including the custody of their young son. Lovejoy, born on the 26th of October 1972, had dated Mulvihill for a year before the couple got married in 2007. However, the marriage faced problems right from the start, as Lovejoy suffered numerous miscarriages before she finally had a son. And within 7 years of their marriage, Lovejoy had filed for divorce. The long court case following the divorce filing only strained the relationship between the couple further, as the initial full custody and child support benefits granted to Lovejoy for their then 3-year-old son was changed for the couple to share instead. Lovejoy was also required to pay Mulvihill $120,000 as she kept their family house in Carlsbad, California. Lovejoy did pay Mulvihill the required sum, but she never wanted to share custody of her only child, so, in a surprising twist, she hatched a sinister plan to execute her ex-husband. On the 4th of September 2016, Mulvihill received a call from someone pretending to be a private investigator who threatened him with alleged evidence of his mistreatment towards his wife, which could be used against him in court. The caller was able to convince Mulvihill to go to a remote location near Rancho Santa Fe to collect the evidence. And on reaching there with his friend Jason around 11 p.m., Mulvihill was shot in his side after spotting someone in the bushes. However, the bullet missed his heart and he was able to survive the shooting. Investigations into the attempted murder were conducted, and it was quickly concluded from the evidence found, such as cell tower data, that Lovejoy had been involved in the attempted murder. The man behind the gun was also discovered to be former Marine, as well as Lovejoy's gun instructor and lover, Weldon McDavid, who had made a run for it after his failed attempt. The AR-15 rifle he used was later found in his garage. After the pair were arrested a week later, it was revealed that Lovejoy had paid McDavid $2,000 to assassinate her ex-husband to get him out of the picture with concerns over their son. During a court hearing, Lovejoy alleged that Mulvihill had mistreated her and her young son. However, both Mulvihill and the prosecutors disapproved of the claims. Investigators discovered surveillance footage of Lovejoy from less than a month before the attempted murder, where she purchased the burner phone which McDavid had used to call Mulvihill on that fateful night. And on the 13th of November 2016, a jury found Lovejoy and McDavid guilty of attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Video footage captured from the courtroom showed Lovejoy's unexpected reaction when the verdict on her charges was pronounced. Immediately, the guilty verdict was read. Lovejoy, who had been staring blankly ahead while sitting beside her attorney, suddenly slumped as her head hit the desk. There were murmurs of both shock and concern around the courtroom, as it had appeared that Lovejoy had gone unconscious. Court officers had to rush to lay her on the floor before she was eventually rushed to the hospital, where it was confirmed that she had fainted. Lovejoy was eventually sentenced in December to 26 years in prison, while McDavid received a 50-year sentence for being the one who pulled the trigger on Lovejoy's husband. If you thought these courtroom moments were wild, just wait. There's even more shocking chaos coming in the next video. Stick around to witness unbelievable stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.